glass baby. I met my wife Tiffany when we were teenagers in high school, and she's always been that type of girl who had a fascination for rare things. She was unique and unlike anyone in school. Everyone thought she was scary looking just cause she wore all black and a type of gothic makeup. But really, she was the sweetest, most caring person I had ever met. Getting to know each other, I found out she had a thing for dolls. Wasn't my thing, but they made her happy collecting them, naming them, and of course giving them all names. I'm not sure how she kept up with remembering their names, and she had many. We got married right after we both finished college and tried having kids, but that just didn't work out. Bodily complications arose, but we still tried. Her dolls filled a kind of void for that sadness she had of not being able to have children, so one day, I decided to surprise her. I read in an article that there was a traveling antique flea market coming to town and decided to take her to it and hopefully find some dolls that would cheer her up. The weekend came and she was ecstatic when she realized where we were. As she walked around, I could see that silly happy teenager in her again as she brought me things to look at with a huge smile on her face. Simple to please and never took anything for granted. After being there for hours, eating pizza from the vendors for lunch and walking around some more, we were bushes and tired, but it was the best day we've had together in a long time. Just as we were about to make our exit with bags loaded with her purchases, she suddenly came to a stop and ran to the aisle towards this one vendor with display cases. This vendor had only just begun to set up as a late entry, and what this person had caught Tiffany's eye. As I came up behind her with her hands pressed against the glass like a child in the window of an ice cream store, I looked, and as she asked to see this one item on display, carefully the owner opens the case and pulls out this sleeping glass baby that almost looked realistic, detailed and wrapped in a blue hand-woven blanket. Tiffany looks it over, and immediately her eyes filled up so much love that I couldn't say no to her, even though the damn thing was $800, which was for times more than the 3 full bags of knickknacks we already had. But this doll, this was going to be her life. She held it all the way home and inspecting it all around. No maker name or label of any kind, but the glass around it was something I had never ever seen before. It was beautifully handcrafted, I can say that much, and Tiffany loved it dearly. She put it into her doll room where she kept everything doll related along with its original blanket. She even set up a sort of shrine around it, which was a bit creepy, but that's my girl right there doing creepy things as always. A week passed since we had bought the glass doll, and there were times I'd see Tiffany admiring it, sometimes even more than she usually would with her other dolls. There was also a time that she called in sick from work for nearly 3 days, and half that time she would be sitting with that glass baby, rocking it in her arms and singing to it, which was a bit more weirder than I'd like Tiffany to be. One night, as me and Tiffany were kind of getting into an argument of some sort, I brought up the idea of how she was skipping work and making excuses just to be with that damned glass baby. She got upset and actually took a swing at me, which really shocked me. Even just the look on her face when she missed was a face of shock. She had never acted out like that before, and I started to see that sweet gothic girl I once knew just sort of fade away within this person I love. The arguments didn't stop there though. She resorted to pushing me around, anger outbursts and resentment. This sadness within me started to grow, and my thoughts had only grown darker by the day, and it had only been a month since she brought that damn doll home. It started to ruin us, and I could see that, but Tiffany, she was blind to it all her rage and obsession, and barely even taking care of herself. Things had been getting rough rolling downhill for the both of us. She lost her job, and for the next few months, I'd been carrying all the weight with the bills and rent. Even had to sell some stuff to just barely make it through, but as long as Tiffany had that doll, she was happy. We sort of became strangers just living together. barely even talking and sleeping in separate rooms together. We grew to resent each other and occasionally saying hi to each other, and it just grew sad. My depression gotten worse along with anxiety, and she couldn't care less. Then that day came. Our happy married life turned bad. I finally had enough of her obsession with that doll, and we had the biggest argument we've ever had, which resulted in us pushing each other, screaming in each other's faces, and she even slapped me. Few times right in our kitchen. I grew angry with her as she stormed off to run to her precious doll, and I followed behind her, cursing so much and shoving her as she balled fist punched me. Things had gotten really psychical, but not to the point of drawing blood, but still. As she took one swing at me with her right hand and clocked me right on my cheekbone, I waved my arm around to try and get her away, and I must have pushed her too hard, which made her lose balance and went backwards, losing control, and she knocks over the baby glass doll from where it stood, smashing on the exposed wooden floor. I looked at her as she knelt down crying heavily, and just at a glance, I noticed this thing shouldn't be kicking up dust from being a glass doll. I look at Tiffany, who's crying in her own hands at the mess, but while I got a closer look at it, I instantly got horrified, and I quickly picked up Tiffany from the floor as she began hitting me into her chest with her fist, screaming, and I grab her by the wrists. Tiffany, stop, look. She slowly turns her head at the doll through her long draping dark hair, and she has the same horrific look on her face as I did. We see a small mummified hand sticking out from the pile of glass. We both take a few steps carefully, and I knelt down and pushed a huge chunk of the glass, and what we see was just a whole mummified child remains that was inside the glass baby. This whole time we were carrying a dead child in our home. This thing had to be cursed or something, which explains the anger, rage and depression within the both of us. The obsession that driven Tiffany to near madness. We had to call the police immediately, cause we thought perhaps it was part of a crime scene, but it turns out that the way back then, mothers would put their dead children in clay and in a kennel to preserve their remains, and not sure how this one ended up in a traveling flea market, but we got it. Me and Tiffany came to the conclusion that the doll was actually haunted. This spirit, or whatever it was, followed the doll, which fed off our emotions, turning us against one another and made us into completely different people. The police didn't want anything to do with the remains and said it was our problem. So later that day into the early evening, me and Tiffany took the remains of the glass baby and all its shards, drove out to the country and gave it a proper burial. Things after that episode had felt, I don't know, less heavy, and felt like we both could breathe easier once more. No anger outbursts and arguments. Just me and her being happy once more. But some things did change around our home. She decided to get rid of all her dolls and decided to take up painting, which really made me happy. So happy, in fact, that I turned her old doll room into a studio for her to explore her newfound love for painting. But now she paints dolls on her canvases. I guess it's a step in some sort of a direction, I suppose, but things couldn't be better for the both us, back on track and even more in love.